Kamala Harris is in the process of hiring a vice presidential candidate to join her ticket, with the possibility of announcing this choice as soon as Tuesday. Yet, I'm curious if the potential candidates are aware of the reported work environment under Harris. Recent reports have highlighted a challenging and harsh work atmosphere associated with her. Former Speaker Kevin McCarthy, who is also from California, has shared his observations on this issue. It's widely known in California and Washington that working for her can be a dreadful experience. Employees don't stay long, and even as vice president, she struggled to retain staff. This is a topic that the press often avoids discussing regarding her treatment of those around her. It's a telling sign of what might be expected in the future. Reports about the poor office culture in Vice President Harris's team are not new. A government watchdog found that Harris's office had a staggering 92% staff turnover rate, compared to 72% under Donald Trump. In 2022, a Harris aide commented, "It's always been a problem. You need to have your own people around you." Additionally, a 2019 op-ed about then-Senator Harris described how she frequently used profanity and berated her staff, causing them to be fearful. Even Simone Sanders, a former Harris staffer and MSNBC host, hinted at the challenges of working for the vice president, suggesting that her experience with Harris was notably different from her previous roles. "I had never previously worked for a high-profile woman. All my previous roles were with men. There was a particular day at work when I remarked, 'Ma'am, you might be the last woman I work for, because this is quite overwhelming.' The role comes with numerous challenges, and it's crucial for anyone in a position of power to be mindful of the criticisms they might face. For instance, Simone was a significant member of the team, and I remember her departure vividly. When Simone left, a tweet by David Gins went viral. At that time, many people were leaving the office, and David's tweet featured him sitting at a desk outside the office. The tweet read, "My name is David Gins, and I work for Vice President Harris on behalf of the American people." The public response was, "Blink twice if you need help, David." I remember covering that incident and finding it extremely amusing. Ultimately, such a culture is not insurmountable, and addressing rumors is also manageable. I believe it's best to leave this for your own interpretation. Reports about her office culture have consistently emerged across California, indicating that this is a long-standing issue, as you've mentioned, both currently and in the past. For instance, when President Biden assumed office, he emphasized that anyone who did not operate with respect would be fired immediately. It appears he should have applied this principle to his own administration. We have frequently and consistently reported on various issues related to her public image, including her dissatisfaction with how she is depicted, her displeasure with the shoes she wore on the Vogue cover, and concerns about who was included in meetings during her international visits. The list of grievances she has expressed and the authoritarian style of her leadership are extensive. At the end of the day, despite any claims of uncertainty regarding the facts, the key point remains clear. There is a turnover rate exceeding 90%, which is a significant indicator on its own. In 2019, I came across an op-ed by Terry M., who shared insights from his son's internship experience at the Attorney General's office. According to his account, the Attorney General demanded that staff address her as General while standing, and instructed junior staffers not to make eye contact with her. In contrast, Trump's approach was notably different. He interacted frequently with interns, didn't enforce formalities like standing, and was known for being personable and approachable in individual interactions. He even took the initiative to call an employee's mother to speak with her personally. Given these observations, don't you feel a sense of gratitude for your experience at Fox News? Imagine if we were treated the same way. Out of the original 47 staff members who started in the first year, only 4 remain. Working for someone can reveal a lot about their character, and when a leader is harsh towards their staff, the result is often leaks. It's quite ironic. The show began with a wise comment from Harris, but in just the past 48 hours, their stance on several issues has drastically shifted. If staff members can't be open and honest with the President of the United States, it could lead to significant problems and deterioration. This is a major concern for me as a voter and American citizen, the ability of the person in the Oval Office to acknowledge and admit when mistakes are made. The question arises, who possesses the courage, the determination, or the audacity to challenge authority and say, "Madam President, this is wrong"? I was reading a report detailing an incident during the campaign where she interrogated Karine Jean-Pierre so aggressively that it caught the attention of other staff members. What intrigues me about this situation is that a toxic workplace is every HR department's nightmare. It can result in lawsuits, leaks, and public scandals. Take Ellen DeGeneres as an example, a prominent figure from California who faced scrutiny after years of hosting a beloved talk show. Despite her successful career and widespread admiration, the environment on her show came under criticism once one person spoke out about its toxicity. This led to a cascade of others coming forward, including former guests and staff. The speaker speculates that it may soon be possible to get more information about a current situation. They suggest an idea for a new coalition for the Trump campaign, humorously naming it Angry Kamala Harris Staffers for Trump and implying that it could generate significant online buzz. The speaker then shifts to a lighter tone, joking about a Zoom call and introducing themselves as Emily. They invite the audience to watch their show, Outnumbered, which airs every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern. The speaker encourages viewers to set their DVRs and subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily updates. Key aides in the West Wing, frustrated by what they perceive as entrenched dysfunction and a lack of focus, have largely given up on Vice President Kamala Harris and her staff. They feel there's simply no time to address these issues, never, especially given the pressing legislative and political challenges facing President Joe Biden. The frustration is mutual. Interviews with nearly 36 former and current aides to Harris, administration officials, Democratic operatives, donors, and outside advisors who spoke extensively to CNN reveal a complex situation within the White House. Many in Harris's circle are upset that she is not being adequately prepared or positioned, feeling that she is being sidelined. Harris herself has confided to several close advisors that she feels limited in her political role. Additionally, those around her are cautious about expressing any future political ambitions, as Biden's team is particularly sensitive to signs of disloyalty, especially from the vice president. She is now extremely close to the presidency, potentially just a year away from initiating her own presidential campaign. This situation arises from uncertainties in the political sphere regarding whether President Biden will follow through with his promise to run for re-election in 2024, a commitment he has made both publicly and privately. Alternatively, in 3 years, she could play a pivotal role as a key supporter for a president who is seeking re-election to continue serving until the age of 86. A few insiders who spoke with CNN believe that she is being adequately prepared for whatever role she will take on. However, Harris faces challenges with certain factions within the White House, and her longtime supporters feel neglected. There is a lack of clear public understanding of her actions and efforts as vice president. Although being the first woman and the first woman of color in a national elected position is a historic achievement, it has also brought intense scrutiny and little tolerance for even minor mistakes, as she frequently notes. Defenders and supporters of Kamala Harris are growing increasingly frantic. When they feel annoyed, some share a recent satirical Onion article that mocks her perceived lack of substantial achievements. The article is headlined, "White House urges Kamala Harris to sit at computer all day in case emails come through." On the other hand, when they feel discouraged, they dismiss the rumor, reminiscent of Aaron Sorkin's dramatic style, that President Biden might attempt to replace Harris by nominating her to a Supreme Court vacancy. This speculation has reportedly reached the highest levels within Biden's inner circle, according to someone familiar with the situation. The analysis of the situation reveals that the vice president is perceived to be in a notably weak position. This has led both prominent Democrats within Washington and those outside of it to privately question why the White House has allowed her to be so diminished in public perception. They are speculating about the reasons behind this apparent lack of support or strategic positioning. Eleni Kounalakis, the lieutenant governor of California and a longtime friend of the vice president, provided some insight into the vice president's perspective. According to Kounalakis, the vice president feels deeply honored and proud of her role. Her primary responsibility as the second in command is to assist and support the president in any way she can, and to undertake any tasks that he assigns to her. Kounalakis mentioned that she spoke with the vice president the morning before Harris left for a diplomatic trip to France. Kounalakis commented, "It's natural for those of us who know her to see how much more valuable she could be compared to her current role. That's where the frustration is coming from." Typically, an incumbent vice president would be a strong contender for the party's presidential nomination. However, speculation about potential challengers to Harris has become a continuous topic of discussion among insiders. Politicians with their own presidential aspirations are now privately considering how to discreetly prepare their campaigns in case Harris fails to meet expectations, as they anticipate she might. The situation is more nuanced and differs from what those familiar with the inner workings of the White House might expect. Kamala Harris is the first vice president in decades to assume office with less experience in Washington than the president, making her adjustment period particularly challenging. Tensions between presidents and vice presidents, along with their respective staffs, are not uncommon. For example, Barack Obama's West Wing often disregarded Joe Biden's staffers, many of whom now work alongside him in the West Wing, and Biden himself experienced several missteps early in his vice presidency. From the moment Kamala Harris was selected for the ticket, Republicans and right-wing media have made her a political target, compounded by ongoing implicit racism and sexism. The situation facing Harris is uniquely challenging. There is a constant expectation for the historic vice president to make groundbreaking achievements daily, despite the fact that her role traditionally involves secondary responsibilities. Harris is being evaluated not only on her performance in the conventional duties of a vice president, but also on her historical impact, as noted by Mignon Moore, a veteran Democratic strategist and one of Harris's key external advisors. Moore described this expectation as somewhat subliminal, but nonetheless significant, questioning what is her playbook in history. According to Moore, Harris has emerged as a quiet force within the administration. She can shift focus to various issues simply by her presence, exerting influence in a subtle yet impactful manner. Moore described Harris's approach as one focused on continuous evaluation, asking questions such as, should we be doing more on this issue? Are we effectively communicating with those affected? Are there any key constituency groups we're neglecting? However, many sources, speaking anonymously to provide a more candid perspective, reveal a consistent narrative. Harris's staff has repeatedly let her down, leaving her vulnerable. Additionally, family members have frequently had an informal influence within her office. Even those who have been consulted for advice express concerns about Harris's overly cautious nature and persistent staff issues, which have been a recurring theme throughout her career, from her tenure as San Francisco District Attorney to her role in the U.S. Senate. Biden sought to shape his relationship with Harris in the same way he experienced his own vice presidency. He instructed his aides early in his presidency to utilize Harris in a comparable manner. He scheduled weekly lunches with her, similar to the ones he used to have with Obama, and invited Harris to accompany him to his morning classified intelligence briefings. In response, Harris dedicated herself to demonstrating her dedication to both Biden and the administration, using his relationship with Obama as a model for her approach. Despite Biden's extensive experience as vice president, some White House aides expressed doubts about whether this experience would seamlessly translate to his role as president, especially given the different qualifications, skills, and context involved. In the initial months, Harris was frequently seen standing beside Biden during major speeches, even after introducing him. However, it seems that the West Wing has since overcompensated by significantly reducing her presence with the president. Not limited to public appearances, the situation also unfolded behind the scenes. A week and a half ago, while President Biden, his aides, and various external allies were engaged in numerous calls throughout the day to secure the support of hesitant lawmakers ahead of the House infrastructure vote, Vice President Harris spent her afternoon visiting a NASA spaceflight center in suburban Maryland. An aide to Harris clarified, "We weren't going to cancel her schedule just because of the House's indecision." Later that evening, Harris joined a select group invited by Biden to the White House residence for the final hours of intensive calls in the war room. The following morning, as Biden celebrated the successful passage of the bill, he made a point of acknowledging her contributions, stating, "A lot of this has to do with this lady right here, the vice president." However, this is not the full picture of how things unfolded. While she had attended some of the meetings hosted by Biden with key lawmakers, there were many others she did not attend. It was even noteworthy when she made an unscheduled visit to one of these meetings during the final stretch. Harris had been in Washington for only 4 years and had visited the White House just once before being sworn in as vice president. Missing out on these crucial meetings meant she missed an important part of learning the intricacies of how to successfully navigate legislation through Congress from someone experienced in the process. Aides to the vice president highlight that since March, there have been 150 engagements with members of the House and Senate concerning infrastructure. This figure represents every discussion she has had with lawmakers on the topic. They refer to this approach as Quiet Hill diplomacy, which involves inviting legislators to accompany her on visits to their home states or attend events in Washington. Many of these events have focused on specific elements of the infrastructure bill beyond just its cost. Vice President Harris has been instrumental in identifying concerns from outside the Beltway and has sought to provide political cover for members who are apprehensive about the potential risks to their seats after voting for the legislation. As Harris's spokesperson, Simone Sanders, noted, "It's never just a roundtable. There's always a larger strategic purpose." One of the roundtables occurred in late September, when Harris invited Representative Nanette Barragán, a Democrat from California, to co-host a discussion with Latina business leaders in the vice president's ceremonial office. Barragán was initially reluctant to support all the compromises on progressive initiatives in the infrastructure bill. The West Wing requested that Harris emphasize to Barragán the importance of her vote, which she did. Several of the vice president's aides pointed to this instance as a significant example of her subtle influence. Ultimately, Barragán voted in favor of the bill. However, a person who spoke with the Congresswoman revealed that, although she valued the vice president's input, the decisive factor for her was the support of the Congressional Progressive Caucus for the bill. Harris's aides highlight how many elements of the infrastructure bill reflect the legislation she championed during her time in the Senate, such as accessible broadband, wildfire defense, water cleanup, and clean energy school buses. Over the course of 7 months, she has participated in 30 events promoting the bill in local media markets, which they believe has been crucial in supporting the administration's initiatives. One aide suggested that the issue might be a lack of continuous awareness among some in the West Wing regarding the vice president's team's activities. Another aide expressed that they view themselves as a vital part of the overall effort. Harris has expressed dissatisfaction to her close advisors about not being more involved in the president's strategy for the withdrawal from Afghanistan. This frustration is compounded by the fact that, despite her claims to CNN that she was the last person present when the decision was made, she found herself lacking sufficient information or support to effectively defend the president in public. When Biden selected Harris as his vice presidential candidate, he was effectively positioning her as the future leader of the Democratic Party. However, many of her close associates now believe that he is neglecting his political responsibilities to support her and is setting her up for failure. Her supporters are increasingly anxious as her poll ratings drop below Biden's, fearing that even the core Democratic voters are beginning to lose faith in her. A prominent donor to President Biden and other Democrats has expressed concerns about Kamala Harris's leadership potential. stating that she is not being placed in roles that allow her to lead effectively. This donor suggests that such a situation is counterproductive and recommends a long-term strategic approach that would benefit the party. The donor's advice, directed towards the president, emphasizes the need to position Harris in roles where she can succeed, rather than imposing additional burdens on her. The idea is that empowering Harris to take on leadership responsibilities would not only enhance her capabilities, but also strengthen the president and the party overall. In terms of the specific issue Harris has requested to be involved in, voting rights, progress has been limited. This is partly because President Biden has been focused on advancing his own domestic agenda. Harris has privately advocated for a reduction in the filibuster to achieve meaningful progress on voting rights, a stance Biden has also recently supported publicly. Harris has shared with close associates that she is experiencing a positive working relationship with Biden. However, those who work closely with them describe their dynamic as having settled into a weary impasse. This situation has led to growing suspicion and resentment. Recently, White House aides rushed to support Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, who faced criticism from Fox News host Tucker Carlson and similar online commentators for taking paternity leave after the adoption of his twins in September. Harris's supporters see this as an example of double standards, questioning why she hasn't received similar support when attacked by conservative critics. It's hard to ignore the distinct energy that the White House expends in defending a white man, especially considering that Kamala Harris has endured much of the criticism that the West Wing preferred to avoid, remarked a former aide to Harris, reflecting on recent discussions among several former aides and current supporters. Buttigieg, meanwhile, is not only a former competitor in the 2020 Democratic primary. To many within the party and to wary Harris supporters, he is viewed as a potential contender for the next available Democratic presidential nomination, whether it be in 2024 or 2028. White House aides assert that they were not intentionally pitting one individual against another. They believe the disparity in responses is due to the fact that Buttigieg's decision to take paternity leave was seen as appropriate and timely, particularly in light of Biden's push for a national paid leave law to be included in his social safety net agenda. In contrast, the aides feel that Harris has faced issues of her own making, such as her failure to challenge a student's accusation that Israel was committing ethnic genocide. The West Wing did not intervene to manage this situation. Additionally, when Harris faced criticism from the right, such as accusations of disrespecting veterans for a benign tweet about enjoying the Memorial Day weekend, the White House aides also chose to remain largely silent. New tensions are continually adding to existing ones. The list of grievances between the West Wing and the Vice President's office keeps expanding, including issues that have arisen from Harris's first assignment from Biden this spring. The situation has turned into a cycle of irritations, some genuine, some perceived. Harris's team was frustrated when Biden assigned her to manage diplomatic relations with the Northern Triangle countries, aiming to tackle the root causes of migration to the U.S. However, she was not given a role in addressing the southern border crisis itself. This border situation quickly became a major issue early in Biden's presidency, as unaccompanied minors overwhelmed federal resources. Despite the politically challenging nature of the assignment, Biden had seen it as a mark of respect, mirroring the role Obama had given him during his vice presidency. As previously reported by CNN, Harris herself has expressed reluctance about being assigned to manage the border, recognizing it as a politically perilous position that could undermine her in the future. However, Biden's team was frustrated with Harris for her mishandling of border-related questions, notably when she gave an awkward, laughing response about not visiting the border during a spring interview with NBC's Lester Holt. Those close to Harris believe that the White House failed to defend her adequately, which was particularly frustrating given that she was tasked with delivering the administration's stern, "do not come" message during her first foreign trip, according to a source familiar with the office's operations. Several aides in the West Wing were upset when, a few weeks later, she made an unannounced trip to the border after her staff had given the White House only a few days' notice. This frustration was exacerbated by the fact that White House aides had previously dismissed the idea of her visit as poorly conceived Republican spin. However, this situation partly resulted from a misunderstanding. In reality, White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain and a small group of West Wing aides had known about the trip well in advance, but had intentionally kept it under wraps to prevent leaks. Biden aides have frequently communicated to Harris aides their desire for her to take on more responsibilities and have requested that the vice president's office develop plans to increase her involvement, according to sources familiar with the discussions. Despite regular weekly calls between the teams, aides in the West Wing often find themselves questioning the lack of follow-through on these plans. Recognizing the challenges and the urgency of the political situation, Tina Flournoy, Harris's chief of staff, approached Klain over the summer, expressing that they were overwhelmed and needed additional support. Klain, a known supporter of Harris in the West Wing, meets with her weekly in her office to assist with strategy. With his extensive experience as a former chief of staff to two vice presidents, Klain is well acquainted with the dynamics at play. During his conversation with Flournoy, Klain pointed out that the vice president's office budget was separate and suggested that she consider innovative approaches to utilizing other resources within the office and redistributing staff to address their needs. In a statement, Klain minimized any criticism directed at Vice President Harris, asserting that she and her team have made an exceptionally strong start, describing it as the fastest and strongest start of any vice president I have seen. Klain highlighted her efforts in advocating for COVID-19 vaccine equity and engaging with numerous international leaders, emphasizing, anyone who has the honor of working closely with the vice president knows how her talents and determination have made a significant impact on this administration. Harris's aides argue that she faces a level of scrutiny and a harsh social media environment that Biden did not experience. For instance, a recent example of this is a video tweeted by a Republican super PAC, falsely alleging that Harris spoke with a fake French accent during her visit to Paris, which was subsequently reported by several news outlets. Changes have been made in the vice president's office to address ongoing concerns. In September, 2 new hires were brought on board to assist with long-term planning and communications, which has helped improve relations with the West Wing. Meanwhile, Flournoy has been redirected to the Democratic National Committee, DNC, for additional support. The DNC has engaged a contract consultant to aid with the Harris portfolio, but this effort has faced difficulties. Sources indicate that Harris's staff often only contact the consultant for assistance with damage control on social media, rather than taking a more proactive approach. Additionally, Flournoy has faced rejection from several potential candidates who were not willing to join the office. Furthermore, some current staff members have begun reaching out to their networks, expressing their intentions to leave the office, according to sources familiar with these discussions. The vice president's office is dismissive of many concerns being raised. In a statement, Sanders highlighted the positive outcomes of the recent Paris trip, a key mission where Biden sent Harris to mend strained diplomatic relations. She emphasized, "It is unfortunate that, despite a successful visit to France that reaffirmed our alliance with America's oldest ally and showcased U.S. leadership globally, and the enactment of a landmark bipartisan infrastructure bill aimed at job creation and community enhancement, some media outlets are focusing on gossip rather than the tangible results achieved by the president and vice president." Many of Harris's friends and supporters, along with some staff members and experienced Democratic advisors, believe that she is trapped in a continuous political quagmire. They attribute this to journalists who seem to be relentlessly pursuing negative stories, which exacerbates the existing structural issues related to race and gender. Harris herself is often vigilant about these double standards. However, the concern is significant enough that an informal network of external advisors, many of whom have experience with Hillary Clinton's campaigns, has formed. This network aims to highlight any inadvertent bias in the coverage of Harris and to better promote the work she is doing. She's not only the first woman vice president, but also the first woman of color. This moment is crucial. If it fails, there's a concern that it could set women back significantly for a long time, stated an external advisor. Privately, top aides have expressed regret that Harris did not request more clearly defined roles when she joined the administration. Such roles might have helped her stand out. However, Harris has been hesitant to make any such demands at this time, fearing that it could be perceived as disloyal to President Biden. A former senior aide to Harris expressed that the vice president is frequently tasked with challenging issues that don't align with her strengths, leading to unfavorable situations. Additionally, there is a recurring concern about the lack of follow-through from her office, particularly on issues like the southern border. Fernando Garcia, the executive director of Border Network for Human Rights, initially had high hopes for Harris's impact on immigration policy after meeting with her during her visit to El Paso, Texas this summer. However, Garcia now feels that Harris has become notably absent from the conversation. He noted that there has been no significant push for improved immigration policies and a lack of visible leadership from her. Even Harris's supporters are anxious that her loyalty to the president and her readiness to handle difficult tasks might come at a personal cost, potentially impacting her own career. Biden's aides have emphasized their commitment to supporting and safeguarding his position, given that his approval rating is expected to significantly impact the 2022 midterm elections and his anticipated campaign for re-election in 2024. In contrast, there has been internal debate within Harris's team regarding whether she is compromising too much by aligning herself with Biden. This discussion dates back to the transition period when Harris was asked to transfer her campaign and super PAC email list to the DNC. Sharpton expressed a desire to see more of Harris's involvement, noting that he and other supporters believe the upcoming midterm elections present a prime opportunity for her to enhance her reputation and potentially regain some of her standing with her base, provided she is given the chance and is capable of doing so. He emphasized that the administration should utilize Harris more prominently in the fight for voting rights. Given her identity as a Black woman, Sharpton argued that she embodies the very reason why protecting voting rights is crucial. Sharpton also suggested that Harris had likely spent the year adhering to the White House's more reserved approach on various issues, especially since Biden himself has mostly stayed away from politics and donor engagements and has not actively advocated for his agenda. Sharpton observed that the administration's tone has been one of outreach and bipartisanship. According to him, Vice President Harris has been aligning with this approach and not stepping out of line with the administration's stance. He noted that she has fulfilled her role as vice president, but he believes that the overall tone of the administration needs to shift. Donna Brazile, who was among those who supported the idea of including Harris on the ticket, concurs that a change is necessary following a challenging initial year. Brazile suggests that Harris should be more visible and active, traveling frequently to address various issues such as infrastructure, broadband expansion, and educational improvements. Brazile humorously suggested keeping Air Force Two constantly ready for Harris's travels. Brazile emphasized the importance of Harris being a strong communicator who delivers clear, concise, and consistent messages. She advised against allowing Harris to become disconnected from the broader public and urged that she be given more opportunities to engage directly with people beyond the political sphere of Washington, D.C.